So there's a brief overview of our proceedings this evening, and this is how that goes. I'll read the variance request, open the public hearing. When I'm reading your request, I would ask that the applicant or their representatives come forward and have a seat in front of the board right here by the microphone. The applicant and or representatives will be asked to state their name and their address for the record. And then Environmental Services staff will provide a brief overview of the requested variance, the staff report, and if any correspondence has been received regarding this request. The applicant or representatives will then provide any input, corrections, concerns, and comments. Once the applicant or the representatives have provided their testimony, the board will then discuss the request and ask questions of staff or the applicants or representatives. Upon completion of the board questions, I will ask if there is anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this request. If there is, I would ask that the person come up to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and give their testimony. When all testimony is complete, I will ask the board members for a motion to close the public hearing. Once the motion has passed to close the public hearing, there will be no further input from the audience, from the applicant, or Environmental Services staff, unless recognized by the chair or if any of the board members wants some type of clarification. The board will review and discuss the finding of facts. The findings are a series of questions that the board is required to answer based on the Minnesota statutes and requirements of this ordinance. Based upon these answers to these questions, the board will either grant or deny the variance request, and all questions must be answered in the affirmative by the board. And once the findings are complete, there will be a motion to approve or deny the request based upon those findings. And so now we can move to our regular business here. You should have in front of you the minutes from the February 24th meeting, I believe. Has anybody had a chance to look this over thoroughly? Any corrections, any things need to be made? If there is not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? There's a motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, so we now move to our first item of business this evening to consider a request from Hemker Property LLC, Freeport, Minnesota, from section 9.3.11A3 of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance number 439 to construct a new building structure less than 100 feet from the center line of County Road 39, classified as a minor collector. Said ordinance requires a building structure setback of 100 feet from the center line of the county road classified minor collector. The affected property is 17.79A, part of North 2 Northeast 4, and that's in Oak Township, and the address affected is 26715 County Road 39 in Freeport, Minnesota. And then can I get your names and addresses for the record, please?
Jacqueline Pepping, 200 Liberty Street, New Munich, Minnesota.
Josh Pepping, 200 Liberty Street, New Munich, Minnesota.
Roger Blanker, 41257 State Highway 238, Albany.
Very good. Thank you very much. And was there anybody online? No. Okay, Joan.
Yep.
Joan Hemker. I think I'm muted.
No,
No, you're good.
you're good.
Am I muted?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
you're
hear you
good now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, Joan Hemker, box 262, Freeport, Minnesota.
Thank you very much. And then Environmental Services, we'll take your report.
Sure. Thank you, Matt.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Did you guys have any questions, or was there something that Member Schwegel wanted to bring
I
up?
just wanted to point out to the board and the audience that I have had business dealings with the Hemkers in the past. We bought and sold white-tailed deer back years ago, and when I worked for the sheriff's office, I did the inspections on their property. I just wanted to make everyone aware of that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Did you guys have a chance to visit the site at all? Okay, great. The applicants currently own a meets and bounds tract in Oak Township. The tract contains approximately 17.79 acres in lot area. The property is an A40 zoning district. On October 30th, 2018, a conditional use permit was granted to the applicants to operate Hemker Park and Zoo, an agriculturally oriented business on the property. The applicants are requesting a variance to construct a coffee shop on a portion of the property that will allow access to the public as well as visitors to the park. As part of the project, the applicants have applied for and been granted a septic permit to upgrade the existing septic system that services the park. The property is not in the Shoreland Overlay District. The subsurface sewage treatment system that services the park will be upgraded as part of this project. An alternative to the request would be to construct the coffee shop in a location that meets the 100-foot setback to the center line of County Road 39. Oak Township, Stearns County Highway Department, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. I have had one correspondence and email from Jody Tyke, the county engineer, and they have no objections to the request. Thank you, Mr. Chair,
Very
members.
good. Any questions from the board for staff or the applicants?
I do have one question. Where that's going to stick outside the fence, the coffee shop, that'll be where your access road is now.
Mhm.
Are you going to move that? I have a question for you. Where it's laid out, it'll be covering your access road, your east-west road there. Are you going to
Correct.
move that closer to the county road to get past the coffee shop?
It will actually come to the,
I'll let you use this. This is a pointer, so you can kind of point to where you want it to go.
No, that road will not be moved.
But it,
So it won't be a
through
through,
this pathway right here.
it won't be a through road then after construction.
it's only going to the fence there. It's not exceeding past the fence, though.
Here's the fence.
That's a fence.
The existing perimeter fence of the zoo.
Yep. Is that what, and then on the other side of where, like up a little more, Roger, if you move it up, that's where the road will be. That will not be moved or touched at all with this project. The road will still be right where it is, though. It is just coming up to that fence line.
Okay, because when I drove by and looked, you had orange flagging on the fence.
Right, this will be the public side of the building, and that will just be right even with the fence. And here we have our walking path, and
Okay, on the east end of where your
Right
pointer is now, there's a sign that says one way. Well, I'm assuming you could drive through there and
oh
get
yeah,
out,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
yep.
out onto the county road.
Right, yep, that will still be the same, and it's not, that area will not be affected with this
Okay.
building there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the board members? Anybody from the audience at all wishing to speak to this? You have to ask this. Anyone at all?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I don't know that we gave them an option to
Okay,
speak.
yep.
We should probably give them an option in
Go
case
ahead.
they have anything to add. Thank you.
So the most important reason we're asking for this variance is, last year we purchased an electric tram. It is a grand total of 35 feet long. The front is 16 feet, which is the drivable part. And then we have the hitch, and then the rear 16 feet is a handicap accessible unit. With it being 100 feet from the center line, it will make it impossible to get the tram around here now back to the pathway, which is going to limit where we can take guests, and we cannot prevent people from going everywhere.
Correct, especially with the, we do have several guests, or a number of guests that are not able to make it all the way around the zoo that want to though. And with that tram that we brought in last year, gave us that ability to let the handicap guests see all the animals throughout the zoo and so forth. But if we end up doing that, we will not be able to use that tram anymore. We are landlocked. We have looked at other areas of putting it though. Unfortunately, at this time though, we do not have any more area that we can put that in with our neighbors and so forth though.
Correct. This is pretty much our only solution. We have tried to think of other ideas and there's not any except for this.
Anything else? Any questions? Any comments? Again, ask for the audience. Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this? Anyone at all? Anyone at all? There's nobody. So
I have I guess, a comment.
Okay.
It says in the ordinance it's 100 feet, right? Yet it seems kind of strange to me that the highway department, Jody, doesn't have a problem with it. That, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Madam Chair, members of the board, I did have a phone conversation with Jody as well. And what she said is, I really, it's not ideal, obviously, is what she said. She's not going to object to it. Her only concern was that there was not going to be, it wasn't going to push the parking any closer to the road. Because obviously her worries are people coming off the road and hitting another car. But she says as long as that, the parking goes no closer to the actual road, she wasn't going to make that big of a deal about it. It's a 25-foot deviation. She said it's not a widely traveled county highway. And so that's why, if they would have been asking to put it, at 25, she probably would have had a big objection to it, or something even closer, maybe even, 65. The right-of-way is 50 feet, so they're still 25 feet off the right-of-way, so that does give them room if they ever needed to expand it. But that's about all I can say. She didn't have any big issues other than the parking.
No, thanks. That helps me better understand where she's coming from on it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, for the staff, like the gift place down in this end, how far is that off? Is that about 80, 85 feet? It doesn't look like it's...
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I don't have an exact, but I would guess it's probably about 80. It seems like it's a little bit further back than that existing structure.
Just a little bit, but it's not 100 feet either.
I'm thinking it's 80, 85
Correct.
when I measured it, but it was a while ago.
Right,
I'd
so
say for sure.
there are more things there that are not
Correct.
the full 100 feet already.
Yep.
that if there are no other comments and ask,
Mr. Chairman?
yes?
My comment would be is that there are a lot of buildings, along county highways in the county that are closer than 100 feet from the center of the road, and they've all been before they were all there before this ordinance was passed for 100 feet. So.
Any other comments?
I do have one question to the zoo people. Where will parking be? Will it be at the main entrance building?
It will be, or go ahead, Rod.
Parking will not change.
Okay.
It'll all be the same. We are not touching anything north of the perimeter fence.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I have a motion to close the public hearing. Second.
I will second.
Motion and second being heard. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And so now we move to our finding of facts here. And so our first question is, the proposed use is allowed in zoning
Mr.
districts.
Chair, members of the board, can I just clarify, is Mr. Schwagel going to be voting
He
in
is.
this or not? Okay, you are. Okay,
I will.
thank you.
Yep. Question number one, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning districts in which the subject property is located.
Yes, this is a permitted business that is permitted and allowed within the A40 zoning area.
We have a yes answer for that. Is there a general consensus of the board for that? Okay. Question number 2. The variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls. Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, the primary official control would be the road authority for this setback, and the county road authority has indicated that they do not have any objections to this. So I would believe the answer would be yes.
General consensus of a yes from the board. Okay, so a yes for number 2. The variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Chairman, I would say yes, according to the comprehensive plan goals, to acknowledge tourism's economic value and the prospective contribution of this industry to both the diversity of the county economic base and the potential for growth.
We have a yes answer for number 3, everybody. Okay. Question number 4. The property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner.
Mr. Chair, yes, I believe they do. It's a business that's been operating for some time, and this doesn't really change their operation. It just adds to it a little bit.
We have a yes, general consensus, yes. So we have a yes for number 4. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Mr. Chair, I believe it's unique to the property, and I don't think this variance will have any effect on anything.
I agree, and I think essentially they're pretty landlocked too, so there's really no good options for them at this point. So we have a general consensus for a yes. Okay, for number 5. Number 6, the variance, if granted, maintains the essential character of the locality.
I believe it will maintain the character. It's been a zoo, continued to be a zoo.
Yes, from the board. Okay. And number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations.
Mr. Chair, economics weren't discussed in this.
Yes, for number 7, consensus? Okay. All the answers being in the affirmative, can I look for a motion for approval of this variance?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we grant the variance to build a coffee shop 75 feet from the highway,
Center line of the road.
line of the highway.
And we have a.
I will second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, or do we want to do it by individual, or? Yeah. Okay. Ken?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
And I'm abstaining because of the number. Rob?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Your variance is granted. And if you have any questions, come talk to the staff during regular business hours. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, now we go to number 2, and that is to consider an after-the-fact request from Northland Lumber and Supply of Fairfax, Minnesota, on behalf of KMN Lemon LLC and Karen Sands, the owner for that, and that is in St. Joseph, from Section 10.2.11A2 of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439 to leave as constructed an 8-foot by 26-foot deck that is located ahead of the established building line. Said ordinance requires decks to be constructed landward of the established building line. And the affected property are lots 8 and 9, Ailes Airy Point Addition in Collegeville Township, and then the affected property address is 16626 Kentwood Road, St. Joseph, Minnesota. And then the applicant or representative, can I get you to state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Joe Voss with Northland Lumber. I'm representing Karen Sand. My home address is 17 3rd Street Southwest, Fairfax, Minnesota.
Thank you very much. And then staff, if you can give your report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Can I see a show of hands of those that visited the site? Thank you. The applicant currently owns Lot 8 and 9 of Al's Airy Point Addition. Al's Airy Point Addition was platted in 1947. The tract contains a total lot area of approximately 15,943 square feet on Big Watab Lake. The property is in an R1 zoning district. The applicant purchased the property in 2001. There is an existing 2,728 square foot residential dwelling with attached garage that was allowed by variance, permitted and constructed in 2020-2021. The subsurface sewage treatment system that services the existing dwelling was also permitted and constructed in 2020-21. In October 2021, Stearns County Environmental Services staff did a reinspection of the construction site permit that was issued in 2020. Staff noted that the deck that was constructed was larger than proposed in the variance and the construction site permit application. A portion of the additional square footage was located ahead of the established building line. The property is in the Shoreland Overlay District of Big Watab Lake, classified recreational development. Big Watab is on the list of impaired waters for mercury and fish. The existing subsurface sewage treatment system was installed in 2021 and is still considered compliant. The current impervious lot coverage for the property is approximately 24.9%. An alternative to the request would be to reduce the size of the deck to the dimensions and location that were originally proposed, or modify the existing dimensions to meet the requirements of the building line. Collegeville Township, Big Watab Lake Association, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And I do have one correspondence that I received by email recently. We are writing to oppose the granting of the after-the-fact permit for a non-conforming deck for the property located at 16626 Kentwood Road, St. Joseph, Minnesota. Lots 8 and 9 at Al's Airy Point Addition in Collegeville Township. This permit is to be discussed at Thursday, March 24th meeting of the Stearns County Board of Adjustment. This property was the subject of 4 separate 2020 Stearns County permits issued in conjunction with the construction of a home on the property. Permit 017322 has no reference to a deck to the shoreward side of the established building line. The contractor, Northland Lumber and Supply, and the owner, KMN Karen Sand, obviously knew from their permit and from the construction drawings that they submitted for that permit that no approval of a deck of any type was included. In permit 017322, the contractor and the owner cannot plead ignorance of the ordinance or the stipulations of their permit. In general, and in this particular case, after the fact permit should not be issued as a means of disregarding granted county permits. As we commented to Environmental Services and to county commissioners when Stearns County recently revised its shoreland ordinances, vigorous enforcement of permits and ordinances is critical in the county, is to gain the benefit of the various environmental protection laws passed by Stearns County government. Too often, landowners disregard the ordinances and ignore the conditions of their permits during construction or when making shoreline modifications, expecting that they will be able to receive forgiveness and after-the-fact permit later. In this spirit, we oppose granting the after-the-fact permit for the violation of permit 017322. We also note that permit 017322 and accompanying permit 017543 granted permission for home construction at 16626 Kentwood Road under the condition that a 10-foot native plant buffer will extend the majority of the shoreline, other than the 25-foot wide access area on the dock site. As nearby seasonal residents familiar with native plant buffers, we note that no work on the buffer had been completed by the end of the 2021 growing season. We expect that Stearns County Environmental Services will enforce the condition of these permits and enforce the 10-foot native plant buffer that it is installed in this coming year in accordance with the best practices of Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you for your consideration. Mark and Joan Strobel, 651-738-8151. And they are the owners at 29897 Kestrel Lane, St. Joseph, Minnesota. And that's all I have with regards to this request.
Thank you. Representative, do you have anything you wish to share to the board?
Well, good evening, board chairman, members of the board. Appreciate you taking the time to go through this. So I saw the letter that was written, and I just want to point out first off that permit 017322 originally was very clear that there was an 8-foot by 14-foot deck associated with that permit. I am not here to plead ignorance whatsoever. In fact, would like you to take just a moment of your guys' time to walk you through my point of view and where we got to this point. So I'm very familiar with the plot of land. I was the applicant for the original variance to deconstruct the existing home, which had an existing deck on it, and reconstruct the plans. What's up on the board now is the original plan that was submitted for variance application, which clearly shows the size of the deck. 8 by 14. Oop, there we go. 14 by 8 shows the dimensions, and written on the permit was definitely the size, written 8 foot by 14. When we were granted the variance and we received our construction site permit, we had a number of things we had to accomplish to continue and fulfill the permit. A few of them were talked about in that letter. One was to make sure that the property, there it is, thank you. And right below that where it says permit conditions, number 2 there says the property is at a maximum 25% lot coverage. That was correct. A proposed pervious surface patio shown on the lower level is not allowed. So going through that, we were required to submit a plan to Stearns County showing that whatever we do with that back patio needed to be designed by an engineer and approved before we can proceed. That plan, and before I go on to that phase, there was the portion of the landscape buffer as well, which I will discuss here in just a moment. So those are the 2 major items that are in question at the moment. The pervious paver, I hired Westwood Professional Services to engineer a pervious paver plan. It was submitted to Stearns County. This is the plan that was submitted. As we know, decks are part of our pervious paver, or excuse me, our pervious and impervious counts that we need to take into account. And as you can clearly see, I have written in, or they have written in, the size of the proposed deck. Once again, the deck did change size. I was not hiding the fact that we wanted to change the deck size with this new plan. Mostly because, yes, we were changing pervious amounts. Now, this was approved by Stearns County. I got the letter back saying, yes, you can proceed as indicated. The one thing I want to point out is that a portion of the deck is what has been found is beyond the building setback line. I think you had a drawing of that. There you go. When you do the line, and this is just an aerial shot, I know it's not 100% accurate, but yes, there is a portion of the deck shown, and I'm not denying that whatsoever. In fact, I take it upon myself that when, and Jamie, you can attest, I look into things as much as I possibly can to make sure I'm not I'm going by the ordinances. I'm not going away from it. That's why I submitted the plan. That's why I'm not trying to hide anything. The ordinance, as I read it, talks about decks, which are unclear, but it says decks are attached to a dwelling that was constructed after 1972 must meet all structural setbacks. And as I read that, things like overhangs on houses are not looked at when you're talking about building setback line. You're looking at foundation. In this case, my deck structure, my structural components of the deck and the foundation do still meet that requirement, which is why I have that's why we increase the size of the deck. The footings and the posts that support the deck, the structural portion, meet the requirement. Thank you. Which is why I submitted. Now, we did not construct the deck until I got approval from Stearns County. So when we got to our second site condition and said, hey, we're going to get our landscape buffer cleared and say, yes, we're good to go, I called in, asked Jennifer Buckentine to go and do a site inspection, thinking that, yes, we are in compliance. She came back and said she could not find the landscape buffer plantings that would show we are in compliance, and we're going to have to wait till spring. This was in October, so the plantings were done. She couldn't find them. And to her point, if she couldn't see them, she can't prove it. I have no way of doing it at this point. I hired TS Landscaping to do the change. He says he's done it. Homeowner says it's been done. I can't prove it until the plantings start to grow, and we got it pushed back until spring to do another reinspection. On that reinspection, I got the letter saying, "Hey, you didn't meet the requirements of your deck. You have two options: tear it down or apply for a variance," which puts me at today. I had two options, and so I'm here in front of you today telling you my story of how I got to this point. I am not pleading ignorance. In fact, I'm telling you, I thought I took all the correct steps to get to this point by how I understood the ordinance on the deck, on how it can be constructed, and the size it could be. I went back to foundation lines and the fact that when, let's just say, the next property owner wants to build, the deck actually has no relevance to building setback line. You look at the main structure. So again, I felt that we were in compliance until I got this letter. And so here I am today, finding out what my next steps are, because I felt that we were in the right. So.
Thank you. Questions from board members?
Yeah, but question for the staff. How do you interpret what he just talked about? Are the foundations, that has to be within the setbacks, or can it, the overhang of the deck? How does the ordinance say? How do you interpret it?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm sorry, Mr. Hulk. So we actually look at the entire deck, the walking portion of the deck. We don't just go by the support of the deck as to where that is. And so if you, Shelley, if you could go back to that other picture. No, the aerial photo with the deck on it. There you go. So as Shelley zooms in a little bit, you'll see we do have just a small portion that is ahead of the building line, and that's the actual area that you can walk on and, you know, put your table on or whatever. Is it nominal? Yes, but it is ahead of the building line, and unfortunately that's what was determined when the reinspection was done. And had the deck been constructed as was originally proposed, that deck would have stopped right about there, and it would have been at the building line. And so
how do you know where to start the measurement from the shoreline?
we don't, in this situation, it has nothing to do with the shoreline. It has to do with the building line from the foundation of this home to the foundation of this home. That's the building line that they have to build behind because they are not meeting the 100-foot setback. This lake has a 100-foot setback, structure setback. Our ordinance has a caveat that says if you have a home on your adjacent properties, you can go closer than that 100-foot setback with the building line, but you can't go ahead of the building line.
So the building line is determined from the other
From the
structures on each side.
closest point of this home's foundation to the closest point of this home's foundation. That's
Okay.
why you're seeing that line right there.
Okay.
That's the building line that they had to stay at or behind. Their original 8x14 deck was all behind that building line. When they put the addition this way, that's when they ended up going over that building line. Now, I'm not saying it's a lot. It's because it's clearly not.
Right.
But a portion of it is. So had they put that addition back this way more, you know, instead of putting it here and put it here, they could have, it would have been fine. But they do have some stairs going down here, and they also, if you look at the picture, if Shelley wants to bring up the picture, they do have a garage door here that they didn't want to cover with the deck, I'm assuming, which makes sense. But there would be an option to move these steps over to this side where the original deck was supposed to be, the 8x14, and then taking the rest of that and swinging that over here and having this all deck here with the steps going off there. That would be fine because decks or steps are not considered part of the deck. So that could go ahead of that building line with those steps. But is that something that is worth making these people do? That's the decision for you guys to make. That's why they're here.
Well,
He would prefer to keep it the way it is and just get the variance.
Well, how does the ordinance read where he interpreted it one way and you interpreted it a different way? Maybe that's would be of interest for us to look at.
I'll read. Do you want the definition of the building line? Is that what you would
Whatever.
like?
Maybe,
I guess I
maybe
don't,
you can
what
help.
section were you interpreting?
Yeah,
that?
what part were you interpreting that made you do what you did?
Mr. Chair, I have one other solution. They could have, when they asked for the variance last year to put the house up, if instead of 63 feet, if they'd asked for a 62-foot variance, they'd have been 1 foot closer to the road, and all of this stuff would have fit in just fine, probably, right?
Sure.
And one more comment that I have, you know, the applicant indicated that he made the comment that the deck was approved by Stearns County, the larger deck, when it was turned in, when you turned in the sheet with the, to approve the pavers. I guess, you know, I think you're assuming that because it was drawn on the picture, then it therefore was approved. I guess if I were the county staff person and it was being submitted to me, and the question was, are these pavers okay? I'd be looking at the pavers. I'm not going to go through the plan and measure every distance, every shape that was on the picture to see if it matched the previous application. So I don't think that's a justification to say that the deck was approved just because they drew it on a plan that was submitted with the pavers. You know, if I were staff, if it was an issue with the pavers, I'd look at the pavers. I wouldn't be looking at the rest of the plan.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm glad you brought that point up because that was a question that actually Shelley and I had talked about. And we do have one gentleman in our office who looks at all impervious or pervious pavers because he has the knowledge of the products and stuff like that. And so it just so happens that he did look at it and say, yes, they met their pervious requirements, but he wasn't the one who issued the permit. And so he didn't know that there was a deck change on there. And so if that question was out there, that's where, you know, where it would have been missed. So thank you for bringing that up.
Mr. Chairman, question for staff. Could we look, you know, have the reading of the variance that was granted for this house? Is there any other aspects of this that are out of compliance?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, there are no other non-compliant issues with
Other
the
than the
variance
fact
that was there, other than that small corner
they
of the
had,
deck.
they
that's
had
ahead
that
of it.
deck, and
Correct.
that's what was the variance that was granted.
The previous
so this
variance
is
that
done-
they had was actually not, they had a building line established by the yellow line you're seeing there. So
Yep.
the deck that they proposed originally was good. The variance that they had was actually for Kentwood Road, the location, because it wasn't meeting the road setback.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Member
That-
Gamrat?
Yes, that was, I wanted to know what we
Yeah.
had a variance about
Yep.
was on the other side.
Correct. It was the
Yeah.
road side.
But this deck that was on the original plan was part of the plan that we approved.
Correct. Yep, it's that plan you're looking at right there. That was the original one that was submitted with their original variance request. And it was also the plan that was submitted with their construction site permit until they submitted the pervious pavement map.
Oh, but the pervious paver has nothing to do with the deck.
Not specifically, but like I said, when that was submitted to our office, that went to another staff member, not the person who issued this permit for them. And so when he looked at it, he didn't look to see if deck sizes changed or anything like that, because the pervious pavement that they were proposing was outside of that deck location. And so he just looked at the calculations that they had, the design that was put together, and he sent a letter that said, yes, you're meeting the requirements
But,
for the pervious pavers.
but there was nothing in that letter that said also a deck.
No.
Thank you.
So I want to ask a couple more questions. So the size of the deck was changed, right?
Correct.
Who made the decision to change the deck? The owner of the property or you guys as the construction?
No, so multiple people. I mean, this wasn't a one clear shot, right? So we came through, and because the landscaping on the lower level was part of the site conditions to be reapproved, because it was patio pavers were unclear at the time on the lower level, and it was very clear. I said we don't quite know how the landscaping is going to go on the back side, so we need to apply to make sure that we have the right landscaping with the drastic slope of the land. When we got to that point, there was the homeowner, there was myself, and interior designer as well, and we looked at the possibilities of what can be done with this back area. One, we have the garage door, as you see. The steps were located on the garage door side mostly for traffic patterns, right? Making sure that coming in and out of the home was kind of all gathered in the same spot. When they were asked me, like, how big can we make this deck? The original deck that was on the structure before we tore it down, and I realized that on all of your paperwork, the surveys and everything, there is no deck shown on any of it. And I have photographic evidence showing that there was. Existing deck was 14 by 26, a very, very large deck. So she was used to this size, and I said, we can't go out that far. It's impossible. We have hit the building setback line. And she said, well, the original deck was 8 feet out from the house, which is, again, 8 by 14, very clear on the drawings. Impervious count is based on the whole deck, not just the structure. So I have to show on my plans, yes, this is the size of the walking space, 8 by 14. In this case, changed to 8 by 26. It's symmetrical on the house is how we came up to this. The deck itself is cantilevering over the beams, meaning it's hanging over. It was my call to say, look, I read the ordinance as it being the structure, the foundation. Overhangs on homes don't count, and if we're going to be shown that, yes, we meet the setback, the structural components of the deck still do. That was my interpretation, reading the code, reading the ordinance, and again, in my defense, I did submit a plan that I thought was being reviewed for all of the pervious account. It's shown on that plan that there is a deck measurement of the pervious amount that needs to be, or impervious amount that needs to be accounted for. Again, from my standpoint, I felt we were in compliance based on what I had done for the ordinance. And I wouldn't have gone forward if I would have been told, no, we need clarification on the other portions of this drawing that was submitted. And I guess at first I thought they were saying the steps were beyond the line, which they are. But apparently that's a access to an accessory structure and has no bearing whatsoever. You had asked about 100-foot setback from the water line.
Yeah, that's what I thought we were measuring. I was misunderstood on my part that it's from the other structure.
Correct, yep. And likewise, there are, I guess in my plea, yes, if I am in the wrong, I didn't believe I was until your staff made a site inspection and said, look, you didn't do this right. And I'm going, I thought I followed all the steps I was supposed to.
Again, I mean, we're taking time here, but that's okay. Have we found the ordinance that we could hear what it says? If there's ambiguity in the ordinance, for me, that's important to understand. Where one person could interpret it one way and somebody could interpret it another way.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I will ask, Joe, do you have the section that you were referring to? I guess I don't know where you pulled it from.
In my answers to the variance application, I thought I wrote it in there. Sorry, so the first page, this is the print-off of Stearns County ordinances. It's the first colored, second colored page. It says decks. So
Section 10 to 11, is that?
I'm gonna check that. So the first portion just says under decks, decks attached to a dwelling that were constructed after June 26, 1972 must meet all structural setbacks. So obviously, I realize that doesn't apply because we don't, for the time it's built. So then I go to the structural setbacks of what is required, and that's where I start. You go to, sorry, what did you say?
Was it, I'm just seeing what you have in your application here as section 10 to 11 A3C is what I'm seeing, so.
10 to 11. So ordinance 10.2.11 says placement, design, and height of structures. Part A says placement of structures on lot. Part 1 says setback in feet from ordinary high water level. And then it was part what again?
10 to 11 A3C is what you have in here.
So A, then 1 was setback. Part 2 was establishing building line for principal structures.
Okay, so that section talks about deck encroachment toward the ordinary high water level shall not exceed 15% of the existing setback of the dwelling unit or principal structure which it is being attached to, shall not result in a setback of less than 30 feet from the ordinary high water level, whichever is more restrictive. But that only applies to structures that were constructed prior to 1972.
Correct.
So if that's the one we're referring to.
Unless that's a different answer. That one I was, members of the board, sorry, I was listing that because there are a multitude of decks out there right now that, depending on the time that was built, are allowed 15% encroachment. In this case, it's a 100-foot setback. That's 15 feet. In my case, the benefit of tearing this deck down to gain less than a foot of encroachment seems tough to palate, but with multiple other decks out there in Stearns County that clearly are allowed to go closer than 100 feet. No, the one that we are looking at says,
Is it the building line section?
that's the only one that ever talks about it. is establishing building line for principal structures. And as for decks, part 3, they say decks that cannot be constructed in accordance with section 10.2.11A1, which is just the 100-foot, the one setback, or section 10.2.11A2 of this ordinance, which just talks about established building line of principal structures.
Correct.
So my interpretation is that it is leading you down a path to going back to principal structures when you're establishing building line, which it's my understanding is defined by the foundation of the structure, not things that overhang it.
Right. So the foundation of, we're using, so, yeah, let's go back to that map. Okay.
Oh,
So,
sorry,
what-
Jamie, I apologize.
No.
The one thing I do want to note is that I agree the pervious count, the walking surface, is beyond the line. I'm not denying that because you can see it clearly. I'm just saying that it was constructed so the foundation was within the setback line. I'm not arguing the fact that, yes, my walking surface is.
No, and I was just going to explain how the ordinance reads. So the foundation that you're talking about is for the adjacent properties. We don't use decks. So if these people had a deck, or these people would let's make it easier because you can see it better here. So if these people had a deck that came out 8 feet, the building line section of the ordinance says we have to use the foundation of the house, not the deck, when we're determining building lines. So the line would still be drawn from here to here, and that's what the section of the ordinance on building line establishes. So let's say these guys wanted to build a new home. We aren't going to use this deck in that building line. We're going to use their foundation and the foundation of the property on the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so let me kind of paraphrase what you just said. So
Yep.
if I look where that line is on the left,
Yep.
if that line was closer to the house, that would mean they could build no deck at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
They would, in that scenario, they would have to have a patio or something that's less than 12 inches off the ground, because that entire, or they would come to you guys for a variance if they wanted to do a deck. Correct. So I think there was just, I don't know that there, I don't know how to say this. I'm not trying to say there was anything wrong on your part. You interpreted it how you thought. I think the thing to learn is before you alter a permit, you should call our office and say, this is what I'm looking at doing. That's just my opinion. People should call us and say, hey, I know I proposed an 8x14. I'm now looking at doing an 8x29. Is that going to be okay? But because then we don't have to worry about interpretations and how you're interpreting the ordinance and how we interpret it, because there can be nuances in my opinion.
In his defense,
Right.
he had a deck dimension.
Correct.
What he submitted.
Correct.
You didn't look at it. That's what he's saying. So I guess my point in going through all these machinations here, there's ambiguity here.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's important for me
Sure.
to understand. I don't know if anybody else cares about it, but I do.
And again, I'll agree with you that it was on his pervious pavement. And I'll go back to the fact that we have one person who works with those, and that person knew nothing about this project. So he wouldn't know if there was a change in the deck. And that's where maybe it could have been brought out at that time. Hey, we also changed the deck. Is that going to be an issue? I'm not by any means, trying to slap him on the hands or anything.
No, I
I'm
understand.
just saying there was probably a little miscommunication on both ends. I would say.
Yeah, and my thought is, kind of backing up what he said, this is what an 8x12 change from the original deck that was on the drawing to this. If I'm a professional builder and I'm going to change something 8x12, which is the size of a small bedroom, this is deck, but I'm just comparing it to the size of a small bedroom. If I'm going to make that big of a change, I'm going to check to make sure that it fits in my permit.
This whole thing is starting to make less and less sense because you can go from the building to a building and the deck sticks out. But if the neighbor puts a deck up, I can't use his deck for the setback, but my deck, if it sticks in the way, that counts. This, you know, because here you're going from one foundation to another, and you should use his house. Actually, is the farthest back house of all of the houses there, and the deck sticks out this far past that I don't understand that either the deck is counted or not counted as far as the line of sight. You know, like you just said, well, if the neighbor puts one his out, we can't use that. Well, then how come this one counts? That's, I'm getting to be confused.
Well, Mr. Chair, members of the board, if the neighbors wanted to put one out, it would require a variance probably as well, because we would use the foundation of this property and the foundation. See, this structure is already at about the same location. So if we went from here to, I don't know which one, I think they're building a new home here and it's going to be up in this area as well. If I, yeah. So
the Sands house is about 4 feet back from the next door house, so there couldn't, even if they put a property line, it'd be way off toward the lake.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I have one question for the applicant. Why, when you submitted the new plan for the pervious, why did you think that would why did you think it would cover both, the deck and the pervious cover? You were turning that paperwork in for the pervious cover.
That's correct. So the pervious count must include the deck, right? By counting your impervious calculations, the deck is considered a part of that. I need to show what that is, right? The structure, the foundation of the deck does not pass up the building line. So what I was submitting was, yes, I am changing the size of the deck, but I'm still meeting all my requirements. I'm still meeting my pervious count, and I'm still meeting this building setback line based on how this ordinance points me to establish where that foundation is. It points me to point 2, which points me back to establishing a building line for principal structures. Even though it's not a principal structure, that's what it's telling me to go interpret. So then
the foundation is the foundation.
What's that?
The foundation is the foundation.
And
how do you interpret that different than what you build the house on?
He was interpreting the foundation of the deck.
Of the deck.
The pillars, where the concrete pillars that the deck sits on.
It's cantilevered out.
But
yeah.
So we're talking about the deck structure, the structural portion of which is the foundation, versus the pervious count, which is the walking surface. There's two different aspects.
Okay.
So I submitted, yes, I changed the size of the deck. I'm showing it. I'm not saying I'm hiding that, right? And I'm saying, yes, now I still meet our pervious count, which is one of the aspects. There was no need in my eyes to say, well, here are my posts and I still meet my setback, because I knew I met the 100-foot setback already. According to how I point my way through your guys' ordinances, it says to establish your deck line, go to establishing a building line for the building structural components. That's the only thing I have to go off of. So if the structural components are the foundation, which is how they do homes, or the structural principal structures, the deck was done the same way. And retrospect, we don't go to the overhangs of a house and say, nope, we have a 2-foot overhang, so now we have to count from that point instead of the corners of the house. In my eyes, it was the same interpretation. I got foundation and overhang. Principal structure, foundation, and overhang. I was meeting the setback line. I wasn't trying to say I want to exceed the setback line, because my eyes, I already was. And Bonnie, I do appreciate your comment. If you're going to change something, yeah, I'm the builder. I should make sure I've crossed all my T's and dotted my I's and made sure this is all good to go. That's why if you look at the design of the deck, the posts are pulled back. I was dotting my i's and crossing my t's, saying, yes, this is how it's interpreted. It's a building setback based on structural components. And what's my next step? Get the pervious pavers approved. Don't hide anything. Send over all the information you've got so they can review it. Again, in my eyes, it was a surprise to get the letter saying you need a variance. So I'm now, again, following the steps. If this is what I have to do, this is what I got to do. I'm back in front of you guys doing what I feel is correct.
For me, there's just a lot of ambiguity, and you said the stairs don't count, but the deck structure counts. So I guess before we ever do anything else, one of my recommendations would be, for me, there's enough ambiguity here. I think the ordinance ought to be clarified and changed and updated to make it clear.
Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, do we have a copy of the variance as it was granted when this came up? Of all the aspects of the variance, whether, I think there was, if I remember, and there's so many, but some of these things, there was supposed to be some, things down by the lake, vegetation down by the lake that was supposed to protect the lake. And that was part of the thought of the granting the variance.
Yeah, that's what they were talking about.
Actually, you are correct. There was an existing landscape buffer, and it was asked to be added to native plantings. When I asked for a reinspection to say, yes, that's been complete, the time of year did not allow for Jennifer to say, yes, you are in compliance, because she couldn't see the plants.
Aren't some of these plants, I've seen a bunch of them, they're supposed to be a bigger plant that you could see that it was planted or not planted?
If I remember correctly, the vegetation that was asked was mostly grasses.
I don't know.
Mr. Chair, members of the board,
I don't remember.
we don't specify whether they have to use 6-inch plugs or just seed it.
Yeah.
And so I guess I can't speak on behalf of the property. I don't know what was placed there. It could have been just seeded and just sprouting at the time, or maybe it wasn't able to be seen at all. We will take care of that issue to make sure that, the requirements were met of that original variance. So he'll reschedule another reinspection when we are able to see that those plants have taken root and have grown from the original variance. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's a little bit that the original variance was granted with that specific size of deck. And if they were going to change that, that would be almost the need for another variance.
Well, and that's why they're here today, because
they built the deck before the variance was granted.
I agree. If plans change when it comes to variances, if plans change, they property owners or contractors should be calling us on variances, because technically nothing can be changed when a variance is granted for the structure that's being built. So I agree with you, Member Gamrad, in that scenario.
All right, thank you.
And, I don't know if that's been made clear enough to property owners and contractors. We try to tell them we need final building plans, because nothing can change once the variance is granted, because you've provided this board in making their decision the building, your building that you're going to propose to build. And so I agree with you.
The proposed deck that was on this plan was behind the
building line, correct?
Behind it, as it's pictured there. And to enlarge that or something, you would be in trouble. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more question for staff. The letter that you read to us,
Mm-hmm.
are you allowed to tell us, is that a neighbor close by, or is that just somebody
It's somebody on the lake. I don't believe it's a neighbor like next door or anything like that.
Okay, that's
I
what I wanted to
actually
know.
wasn't able to even look. It's not even, I don't believe it's even on that same road. I wasn't able to find it, but I didn't go that far into
Yeah,
it.
that's fine.
I usually look just to see, is it neighbor right next door or
What I
on the
wanted
other
to know.
side?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
All right, any other questions, comments? Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this at all? Anyone at all? Anyone at all? And then can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We now move to our finding of facts this evening. So remember, this is an after the fact. Is the proposed use allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located?
Yes, decks are allowed in this area.
Yes, affirmative. Okay. Number 2, is the variance in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say no, being that it's past the building line.
We have a no answer. Do we have any other? And take some time for this.
I would disagree with that, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a deck. There's other decks. The fact that it's over the line slightly doesn't negate the purpose of it. There's other decks.
Okay. You wanna?
Yeah,
did you have
and
something?
what I was going to comment was that my initial thought would be to say no. But then when I look at, there are those A through E statements that come before the findings of fact on the after the fact form. And E says, are the county's benefits outweighed by the applicant's burden? So normally I'd say no to that, but if I consider what is the county gaining compared to what the burden on the applicant would be. So therefore, I think I would need to say yes on that one because of that reason.
And since there's a division in the vote, I'll take a vote. George?
Yes.
Yep. Here's a yes. Here's a yes. Yeah. I'm just making sure it's clear for my records. Yep. And so Dave?
No.
And Bonnie's a yes. Rob's a no. And Ken?
Yes.
Okay, it does carry. So it's a yes for number 2. Number 3, is the variance request consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Mr. Chair, I would say it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's a use of the property like other properties surrounding the lake. It's just because the deck is 1 foot or 2 foot over the line doesn't mean that it's not consistent with the uses.
We have a yes for one, and we can talk this out, or if anybody's ready to vote, fine, but I'll take the time certainly to figure this out, and we can have a discussion about that.
I think this is a little stretch, but I'll say yes and use Lakeshore Living Goals number 3.
Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts on number 3? So you have 2 yeses so far.
I'll say yes.
Ken's a yes. Dave or Rob?
I would say yes.
I'll say yes.
Okay. So there's a yes for number 3. Number 4 is the property owner proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by an official control.
Mr. Chairman, I would say no, because they went and did something that was outside of the original variance granted. And if they wanted that, they should have had it on the original plan, and we would have dealt with it at that time. But it's like we're going around the ordinance.
Okay, so Dave is a no for that. Any other thoughts? Or again, we can think about that certainly.
So, Mr. Chair, the counter to that is, if you look on the first page, we're also to consider, did the applicant make a substantial investment? Yes, he did. Is construction completed? Yes, it is. Are there similar structures in the area? Yes, there is.
Yes, it's pretty hard to say no to any of those
Yes.
A through E. So I'd have to agree with you that this is a yes, that they are proposing to use it in a reasonable manner. They didn't go through it properly, but they're using it in a reasonable manner.
And I'll agree with that, yes.
Okay. And then Rob?
I'll agree with it.
Okay, so that's a yes for number 4. Is the plight of the landowner due to circumstances unique to the property not created by the landowner?
Now here comes something different. The landowner created the problem here.
That's a no.
Well, according to the way it reads, it goes back, if you read the other 5 things earlier, then you can't really say no. But at the same time, if you answer this question correctly, it says, is the plight of the landowner due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner? Well, the land didn't change. The landowner built the deck. In all honesty, he thought he was doing the right thing, but it still came out. Now it's here in front of us. So I'll give him a yes, just because I think the same thing George thinks. This deck is hanging over by this much that nobody is going to take a string and pull it across there and see that deck sticks out 1 foot closer.
Yeah, I just think in a situation like this, we have to use some reasonableness and common sense.
That's
If it was gross, then I would view it differently, but it's not gross. There's ambiguity in the interpretation of the ordinance.
So you're a yes, I assume.
Yeah, I'm a yes.
Any others?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be a no.
Okay.
Because I think that if the applicant wanted it and it was on the variance that was granted in the past, that was voted on by the board and approved, then it would have been done that way, or they should have had it on there. And if we leave too much of this go, everybody's going to be wanting to do it later and get by.
Robert, Bonnie?
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no. It was due to the owner's plans and building.
So number 5, if my vote counts correctly, is a no. Number 6, will the variance maintain the essential character of the locality?
Mr. Chair, if the variance was granted, it won't change the character of the area.
I'd agree with that.
So I'd agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, affirmative for that. Okay. And then number 7, final question. The need for the variance involves more than economic considerations.
Well, I think it does, that the need for the variance is more than just economics. You know, economics certainly are part of this, but I don't think it's necessarily the primary consideration. So I will say yes for 7.
I would say yes.
I agree on number 7 for yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, since there was a no answer on number 5, I would need a motion to deny the variance request.
I just have one question with staff about that. Maybe I'm wrong. Was I to the understanding that if it's an after the fact, that doesn't necessarily apply as far as all the no, yes, no answers? Oh, okay. Then I was wrong. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I believe it's no different than a
Okay.
regular findings of fact for
All right.
a non-after-the-fact situation. So whatever the majority vote is
Okay, thank you.
what it is.
Mr. Chair, what if this comes back a deny, what does this mean? They tear the deck down?
Or
Come with an alternative plan.
if they came with a plan for one that didn't, that was
Yeah.
smaller or,
So we're saying they have to modify it. That's right? That's what we're doing, right? Yeah. I just want to have an understanding of it.
Yep. Mr. Chair, members of the board, that would be it. If this variance is denied, they will have to modify the deck so that it is now meeting the requirement, and it might be as simple as cutting off that corner diagonally there to meet that building line. They can move that section over to the other side and move the steps to the, there are options that they have to come into compliance.
Thank you.
So can I look for a motion for the denial?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to deny.
Motion by Dave, second.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second it.
Motion and second. We'll take a roll call vote. George? And this is for denial.
So if I deny,
If
if
you
I want
wa-
to deny, say yay?
Yeah, so if you want to deny this, it's a yes. If you don't agree with the
I'm a
denial,
nay.
then it's
I'm a nay.
Okay. Dave?
I'm a yes.
Okay. Bonnie?
yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Ken?
No.
All right, the motion is denied, and you can talk to staff about what you can do going further. And then And we move on to number 3 here this evening, to consider an after-the-fact request from Kramer Lee's Delo, I'm not sure to pronounce it, DeLeo, there you go, of St. Cloud, Minnesota, on behalf of Tim and Elise Amundsen, St. Cloud, Minnesota, from sections 5.1.2C2, 5.12C3, and 10.211A2 of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439 to leave as constructed a deck on the legal non-conforming structure ahead of the established building line that is wholly or partly in the shore impact zone of the lake classified as recreational development. Said ordinance requires additions or altercations to be to a non-conforming principal structure that is wholly or partly in the shore impact zone to be landward of the established building line. And the affected property is 0.7A of Government Lot 1, Section 6, Avon Township, and the property address is 19308 Two Rivers Road in Avon, Minnesota. And can I get your name and address for the record, please?
Good evening. My name is Sam DeLeo. My address is 13 11th Avenue North in St. Cloud.
And then is Elise joining by? Okay. 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 Thank you. Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Can I see a show of hands of those people that visited the site? Okay, thank you. And were there any conversations that were had that need to be brought forward here? Okay. The applicants currently own a meets and bounds tract on Two Rivers Lake. The tract contains a total lot area of 16,100 square feet per the survey provided by the applicants. The property is in an R1 zoning district. The applicants purchased the property in 2018. There is an existing 672 square foot residential dwelling on the property that was constructed prior to the official controls, according to the Stearns County Assessor's records. The subsurface sewage treatment system that services the existing dwelling was permitted and constructed in 1993. A septic certification is required for this request and will need to be completed when weather conditions allow. In August of 2021, Stearns County Environmental Services received a complaint about an unpermitted vacation home rental being operated on this property. Environmental Services staff completed a file search on the property and determined a vacation home rental was being operated without a permit. It was also noted that a deck was constructed on the property without a permit. The applicants have since removed the advertisement for the rental from the internet and have confirmed they will no longer be offering the property for rental. The property is in the Shoreland Overlay District of Two Rivers Lake classified recreational development. Two Rivers is on the list of impaired waters for nutrients and mercury in fish. The existing subsurface sewage treatment system will be required to be certified when weather conditions allow. The current impervious lot coverage for the property is approximately 9.6%. An alternative to the request would have been to replace the previously existing 160 square foot deck. Avon Township Friends of Two Rivers Lake Association, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And I have received 2 email correspondence this week. My name is Bob Guggenberger, and I own the property at 19228 Two Rivers Road in Avon, Minnesota. On behalf of all of us who have followed the county ordinances, obtained permits, and had to modify our construction plans in order to comply, or had to change what we built after the fact in order to comply with the rules, we strongly urge the Board of Adjustment not to grant this variance and order the removal of the deck on this property. We know a great deal of thought and discussion goes into the formulation of these ordinances, and they are designed for the protection of all. Likewise, they must apply to all in order to be effective. In this case, the ordinance was also designed for the protection of the lake, and the board must at times reinforce the fact that it is committed to protecting the water quality within Stearns County. Finally, with other ordinance changes that are taking effect this year, It is imperative that the county demonstrate their ordinances mean something. Show that ignoring the rules and paying the fine is not an option. Failing to do so would set precedents the county is not equipped to handle. For all the above, vote no and remove. Signed, Bob G. My second one that I have is, I understand that there is going to be a board meeting of Two Rivers Lake Association and discussion about the deck on the property of Tim and Elise Amundsen. As their neighbor, I just wanted you to know that although it sounds as if some mistakes were made in the location and specifications of the deck is very tasteful and appropriate, and we don't have any complaints about it. Tim and Elise are fantastic neighbors who have always been very respectful, kind, and conscientious. They're a great asset to the lake and this community. Respectfully, Dan and Karen Nesbitt at 19322 Two Rivers Road, Avon, Minnesota 56310. And that's all I have with regards to this request.
All right, and if the applicant's representative would want to speak to this variance request.
Thank you. So this is kind of a unique situation. It is obviously an after-the-fact variance application. When the Amundsens purchased the property, the deck was in disrepair. It's my understanding the boards were frail, and I think Tim said one even broke when he stepped on it. So they decided needed to be replaced. When they did that, Elise had gone to the county to talk to them and find out what needed to be done. And that's where, obviously I wasn't there, so I can't say for fact what had happened, but she interpreted what the county told her, that because the deck was less than 1 foot high, in a portion of the deck was less than 1 foot high or 1 foot above the ground, that she didn't need to have a permit for it. That's my understanding. That's the ordinance. Is that correct? If an entire deck is...
Mr. Chair, members of the board, what we tell people when they call about putting on decks, is it a deck, is it not a deck? We don't look at the material. We tell them if any portion of what you're proposing to do is elevated off the ground by more than 12 inches, it would require a permit and it is considered a deck. So we don't say if it's wood, it's a deck. We don't say if it's cement, it's a deck. We say if any portion is elevated by more than 12 inches, it is considered a deck and requires a permit.
Okay, fair enough. That's what I was getting at. Thank you. So the deck in the front, I guess I don't know if you can't see from these pictures, but I can tell you the ones that were out there to see it, it's over 12 inches on the front side. On the back side, I'm not so sure. I know it's very close to where the old deck was. They interpreted that they didn't need a permit to construct a deck, so they moved forward and constructed the deck themselves. Now, they replaced the deck that was there and also wrapped it around the house, which you can probably see better on the survey. There we go. So the hash mark, thank you. This is where the existing deck was in this area here, and then there was a concrete slab here. And then what they did is they tore that deck off and they just wrapped the deck all the way around the house. It's only 8 feet wide. It's not very big. And the reason they decided to wrap around the house is there's this door here, would be the side door of the cabin, and it has steps going down, and they felt it was a safety issue. Small cabin, you're going in and out of it consistently. It'd be a lot safer to have a flat landing straight out the door than walk out the door and have steps right away all the time. So that was part of their decision to wrap the deck around the cabin. And you know the history is, I guess, how we got there. How I got here was I was contacted by them to do a survey to determine where the deck did sit in relationship to the setbacks on the property. And you can see that this dashed line right here it's a 100-foot shoreline setback line. So it's kind of a unique situation that the cabin, all their improvements, everything else is all within today's setback. probably not too different than many small lots around lakes in Stearns County in Minnesota as it is. So I guess the variance that they're looking for, they would desire to keep the deck on the way it is. I guess they feel that it fits the cabin. It's not gross in size. It's a safety benefit to them. I mean, overall, it seems to me, I guess when I was out there, I thought it looked nice and it fit well with what they had. They would, and have both told me they would have much rather known that they needed to get a permit. They would have got the permit, gone through the variance procedure then to build the deck that they have today. Unfortunately, that communication problem prohibited them from doing that.
Any questions, comments from the board to staff or the applicant's representative?
Yeah, a question for staff. So the size of the deck and the configuration of it, that's okay? It's just the height? Is that the only issue?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, really there's nothing that meets the requirement here. It's ahead of the building line. It's not meeting the 100-foot setback. It needs a variance from the township road yet. The only thing that they could have done is replace that existing deck without a variance. So that existing 160 that was there was constructed prior to the official controls. So they could have replaced that port. You know, we would have been able to issue just a construction site permit and they wouldn't have been in front of you today. If they wanted to construct what they have constructed, it would have required a variance regardless of whether it was done with or without a permit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for staff or the applicant? Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this? There's nobody, but I will ask again. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak to this? Anybody at all? All right. With there being nobody to speak in the audience, can I get a...
Well, I have a question for staff. If they had built the new portion of the deck only 4 feet wide, that would have been permitted because it would have been a walkway. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Okay. You are allowed a 4-foot walkway, which is the same as steps that can go in and out of structures so you can access safely. So if they would have been allowed whatever that line is here, 160 square feet, what it originally was, and then if they would have came back to 4 feet here and went here and 4 feet along here in width, that could have been done with just their regular construction site permit. So that would be an option. That would be an option we would present them if this variance request would be denied. Or they would have the option of just going back to the 160 square feet like was originally on here. So those would be the two options that wouldn't require a variance.
Mr. Chair, question for staff. If they would narrow the other part up for a walkway, could they still have replaced the original deck? Was that the same size as what was original?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so there was originally a 160 square foot deck in this location right here.
Was that how wide was that?
I would have to look and see what those dimensions were. I think I have it in the file here. Yeah. So it originally had a 20 by 8 from what I see here on our assessor's records.
Okay.
So that original 20 by 8 would be allowed to be replaced because that was constructed in 1969 prior to our official controls in 1972.
Yep.
So that portion could be replaced, and then they could do a 4-foot walkway to the rest of that front side on the lake, and then a 4-foot walkway on the side as well.
Okay. And also I see here there's a mitigation option.
Yep. Soil and Water Conservation District was asked to visit this site, just like we do for any other request where a building line or a lake setback is requested. And there were some recommendations from Mr. Berg on what could be done to possibly, as a condition, if you wanted to move forward with granting the variance. Again, that's up to you guys if you want to add those conditions or not add those conditions.
Would the applicants be open to this mitigation?
Do you have a wish on this? I would have to say no, but we are open to mitigating. I think that my understanding with the mitigation, it has to be directly related to and must bear rough proportionality to the impact created by the variance. And what's being suggested is well beyond any impact that this additional deck has placed on it. The sketch that was provided by Soil and Water Conservation was not drawn to scale. You know, they said 25 feet from the, I guess they said the ordinary high water line, which is kind of the top of the riprap there. And they left an opening where the riprap is. So these people would have to access the beach area and dock through the riprap. And I'm assuming if they want to put a stairway in, they'd have to come back again for another permit, for a shoreline permit. Plus, they wouldn't be able to access the beach where on the, I guess let's call it the far right side where it says beach. That's kind of the access that they use to the beach to get to their sandy beach area. So there would be a native planting area where they would be trampling through all the time to get to the beach area. My suggestion would be that we put in a rain garden. I suggested this to the Odmondsons, that we put in a rain garden or rain gardens sufficient in size to compensate for the 1-inch rainfall event for the additional impervious surface that they've created. And that's kind of a standard rain event, I guess, it was designed for situations like this.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I could interject here. Keep in mind that what was given to us by Soil and Water was a recommendation only. So you guys are going to make the decision on if you want to do it, what that, dimensions are. Generally speaking, usually what we've done in the past with this board is the board has allowed them to choose where their access is. So it necessarily wouldn't have to be where Mr. Berg recommended it, if that makes sense. So if they would prefer to have that 20-foot access in this location where it's not riprap, for their docks and their access to the lake, generally, I believe this board in the past has always given that option to the applicants, to decide where they wanted to have their access. So I just wanted to interject that in case the applicant or, the representative in this case didn't realize that that's how it's been done in the past.
I did assume that, and I actually considered that as an option in talking with the Amundsen's. And the one thing you have to understand is that obviously people have lake cabins for recreational purposes. The square footage of this proposed buffer space consumes almost 20% of their yard space. So that's not proportional to an 8-foot deck that goes around a portion of a cabin by any means. So that's why I came up with the alternative suggestion for them. It would still fit the purpose. It would be, a rain garden would be proportional to the impact that they had, and it would still meet the needs or the purpose of trying to protect the lake from pollutants.
And I'm sure it's in our paperwork somewhere, but I can't seem to find it. Could you tell me the dimensions of the cabin?
Don't
Yeah,
have
it just
mine
says the
here.
square footage, but I mean I'm just kind of looking at, what that would mean for the deck and the,
Here, if I scale it.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, according to the Stearns County Assessor's records again, the existing structure is 28 by 24.
okay, so the old deck that was 8 by 20 probably covered the majority of what was facing the
lake.
lake.
Yep, except for 8 feet.
Except for 8 feet.
Because it was 28 on the lake side.
So they could make,
24 going
so if
back
they
towards
cut
the
that
road.
8 feet in half, I mean, the depth of it in half, and then 4 feet on the other side, that would fit within
The ordinance
the
requirements.
ordinance.
And could be permitted by our office.
There was a concrete slab the other 8 feet, so it was 20 feet of deck and then 8 feet of concrete.
There
So
was.
there was impervious across the whole front of the cabin.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and, in essence, 4 feet would allow a walkway, of course, but it doesn't allow you to
Put
put
a chair and a
anything or have
table
a
and,
chair or a table or enjoy the.
4 feet
life
does not
inside.
make a deck.
no.
Thus the reason we allow it to encroach again. We get back to that word
You better be
encroach
sober
again.
on
So,
it too yet. That's only this much.
Yeah.
Well, is it handicap accessible with 4 feet? That's about, you need about,
Yeah.
right, so you gotta stay right up along the edge.
Any other questions?
Okay, now, with doing it that way, cutting everything down, he wouldn't need the rain gardens, or anything like this here. We're seeing, like he's saying, if they put the rain gardens and stuff, which would take care of the runoff, then they would wish to leave it as is.
that would be correct. In that scenario, if you were to deny this variance, then obviously Mr. Berg's recommendations don't come into play because those are conditions for granting the variance generally. Yes. And I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I don't know that a rain garden would actually do what a rain garden is supposed to do because of the fact that you see a mound here. In order for a design for a rain garden to actually work, you need to have 3 feet of separation between the bottom of your rain garden and water features in the soil. Because otherwise what will happen if you get enough rain, it will just pool there. And so I don't know, I'm obviously not an engineer. Generally what we've seen in the past is engineers will say you need to have 3 feet of separation between the bottom of your basin and water features that might be evident in the soil. Because if you get enough rain, more rain than what you have for dry soil there, it's just going to pool in there and it's not going to go away like it's supposed to.
We come up with this lake a lot in the planning commission because there's flooding issues around this lake. Is this area part of the flooding issue, or is that a different area of the lake?
It's usually this lake. So as you can see from the survey here, the ordinary high water level is right here. And it probably actually continues all the way through. Maybe, I don't know if you know, Sam, but there are certain properties on this road where the ordinary high water level, if you have a survey done, is halfway into the property, but the water's actually back a little bit further. So if you get enough rain, there does tend to be flooding in this area of Two Rivers Road.
The top of the riprap or the land side of the riprap is this line right through here. We did survey elevations through the whole thing, and the riprap must have been constructed and that must have been graded with that intent because that was right at the ordinary high water elevation.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, a question for staff. Could that buffered area be narrowed somewhat?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, again, keep in mind that that's only a recommendation. So you guys can make the decision. If you're going to grant the variance and plat the condition, you guys can say it would be 5 feet. You guys could say it could be 2 feet. You guys could say it could be 45 feet. It's totally up to you guys as a board to determine what that is. This is just Mr. Berg's recommendation from Soil, Water, and Conservation District. And so there's nothing that says you have to go with this. You guys can choose, you know, what the appropriate distance would be if you wanted to put that condition on.
And would I guess that Mr. Berg's recommendation would be the optimal choice? I mean, if you were going to do it the very best way you possibly could, that's what he's recommending. But if that's really what we come up with or not.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's the same recommendation every time for you guys. Same distance every single time. Is it the optimum? I'm guessing he's going to say it would be the optimum. You know, at the same point, I don't think his intent is not to take up their whole yard. Obviously, when the representative for the applicant brought it in, you can see that this is an actual survey that he had on here, and we can turn this, if you could turn that back on, Shelley. And I think that's probably why you brought this, to show this is where the 25 foot would actually be on the property. And so is that leaving them enough yard? That's a determination for you guys to make if you think that that's what it should be. I think he brought this in so he could show it to scale on how far that actually would affect the property, rather than just the one that you received is not to scale, if that makes sense.
And I have one more question about this drawing. The total square foot of the deck that's put on here, the steps that are on the side toward the lake, is that more than 4 feet wide, or?
Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, members of the board, that is wider than 4 feet. Now, generally what our allowance for going closer to the lake would only be 4 feet wide. Now, I don't know if that's something they would be willing to, you know, to change. Really, they're already asking for a variance, so the distance we would use would be to these steps because it's more than 4 feet wide. So they're here for a variance to leave as constructed what is here now. So it really doesn't matter in that scenario, if that makes sense.
Then we'll ask Mr. DeLeo, you know, the rain gardens won't work. If we put like 5 feet down the whole length of the riprap, that would be a little over 300 square feet of vegetation there. If you went, would that infringe on their yard a lot? That'd be 15 feet less than their.
It'd be an awful lot less. And something to also consider, which, you know, economics is never the ultimate decider, but when you look at something like this, I just ran the numbers based off of the county's estimated cost per square foot for vegetated buffers, and what we're showing here would cost over $8,000 to construct, which is a lot. So 5 feet along that strip would be much more palatable for sure.
You seem to be answering the questions for them.
I'm trying to do my best. I hope they're happy when we get done.
We got to put something on top of the ground.
Right, and I mean, and I don't know what the water table is there. I mean, obviously, yes, they do have a mound system which indicates higher water elevations, and that is behind the house. I mean, the lake does, or the ground does slope towards lake, obviously. So Jamie's thought of a rain garden probably wouldn't work properly is, I think it would work. Would it work as well as they're supposed to with the 3 feet of separation? Likely not. So I would think that a 5 foot buffer would be a compromise to get something that you'd be more assurance it would work.
I'm just starting at that. The rest of the board can pipe in. If I just was figuring at that, well,
yeah.
If we can't go down, that gives you something.
Mr. Chair, would they be open to say like a 12 feet, we move the access area over to the beach, which is be almost straight out from the cabin, a little buffered on the right, and the rest would be, say, a 12-foot buffer? Would that be something that they would?
I don't know. In my conversations, they didn't want to lose a single square foot of yard space. That's very valuable to them and their use of the property. So I don't know if 12 would be palatable or not.
So we could solve that quickly, then they can cut part of the deck off and make it fit everything, and then they don't lose any of their yard.
Right.
It comes down to that.
Yeah.
They'd have to make
They
a
go
choice.
to 160 square feet and make a 4-foot walkway, they don't lose 1 square foot.
Yeah, can I get a yeah,
After
try.
ask. Oh,
Yeah,
oh, we did?
can I get a motion to close the public hearing? I did ask, yeah.
Oh.
I did, yep.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment from the staff. I guess and maybe you do this, I don't know, but my comment is a process question. I mean, the applicant said, well, you're not the applicant, but the person that came in to ask about getting a permit came back with the understanding that, if it was 12 inches or less, they didn't need a permit. And so I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here for when people come in and you tell them something, they would get it in writing and sign something, because there's ambiguity on this one again.
Mr. Chair, Shelley Benson, Environmental Services Director. That's what the ordinance is. The ordinance is writing. We are very clear when people come in. I've listened. I've been in the room. I hear what my staff says. They say if any portion of the deck exceeds 12 inches in height, you need a permit. That is standard language I hear from most of my staff. However, I've been doing this for 30 years. I write things down for people. I've handed them pieces of paper, and people still come back and get it wrong. So I'm going to tell you, we do the best we can do. We provide them the information. Then they need to ask more questions, and they need to work with what we can, to the best of our ability, give them. We have ordinances. We have sent out new property owner notices to people. So when a new person comes in Shoreland, if they've recently purchased, we send them all the Shoreland standards. We have a website. We ask all people to come in and provide that information. We see people every single day come in, ask the questions. Some people come back, ask more questions. Some people go forth, and there's a variation in how people perceive information.
Sure.
I have some people who are very good about, I get it, they dot their I's, they cross their T's. And then I have people who are like, I hear it in a way that works for me. And it depends on the person. And I don't want to presume they did or didn't know or didn't try to do it right. I just know how my staff typically provides that information. I've heard them on the phone. I've heard them in the permit room. And for the last 10 years that I've been back at Stearns County, that is pretty much how it's been stated. And I would find it hard to believe that they would have stated it some other way. And it is incumbent upon the landowner to understand the rules that we have. And the people of Two Rivers Lake, if you know the people of Two Rivers Lake, they do follow and come in and ask a lot of questions, whether it be the floodplain or any of the other rules that we have. So that lake has had a lot of issues related to flooding, RVs, you name it, they've had it. So it's hard to believe that people on that lake don't understand that there are rules and process.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting your staff did anything improper or explained it incorrectly. What you said is correct. People will take away what they want to take away.
Right.
And sometimes, when you go some places, you have to sign a document to say, here, I have it, I understand it, and they sign it. I don't know if you want to go to that extent. But I've dealt with your staff many times, and they're very professional, and they explain it very well. But people want to believe what they want to believe sometimes.
Yes, that's been my understanding in 30 years of doing business in shoreland and zoning. People walk away with what they want to hear. in the business you do too, sometimes when it's talk about benefits, they hear what they want to hear, and you have to go through a process. So we do the best to explain it. Is there ambiguity? You know what? Everything I do in this world could be considered ambiguous at times. So we do the best to explain it to the greatest extent possible. That's why they're here in front of you. They're making a request. It's up to you as the Board of Adjustment to determine how you want to address that and how you want to manage the testimony that's been given to you, both by the applicant's representative and the parties that have submitted testimony.
Yes, you know, if everybody went by the rules, there would be no need for us, would there?
Wouldn't that be lovely, right? That you wouldn't have to ever allow a variance. However, you guys, that is exactly why you are here in front of us.
But Shelley, to your point, last week at our Planning Commission meeting, we had the same discussion. How do we get lake owners to read and follow rules? Because they don't seem to, we sent them, they've gotten postcards last year, they get things. How do we get the people who have them? And they make suggestions to, well, the realtors should tell the people. Well, realtors are in the business of selling property. They don't care. They'll tell you you can do whatever you want. And we haven't figured out a good way to get all the lake owners to. And as far as this 12 inches, didn't we have one last month or the month before that started at 12 inches also? And then it got up a lot higher. And they just decided if we have one portion under 12 inches, that's good enough. So, but this place stays a lot closer to the 12 inches throughout. That one, if I remember, got to be fairly high.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one question of staff. You said early in the hearing how high off the ground it was on the lakeside, the measurement.
Actually, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I actually did not. I apologize that I did not measure it because snowpack was out, out there. And so I don't like to try and guess on things. What we have seen is on the lakeside, there's 4 steps. On this side right here, there's 3 steps. So if there is a portion of this deck that's under 12 inches, I'm going to guess it's this corner, you know, this portion right here.
So theoretically, on the lakeside, there would be an 8 by 20 deck that they could put back.
Correct.
And on this other side that we see here with the 3 steps, if any portion of it that is 12 inches or less, that could be left.
Nope. See, it's being interpreted wrong
Okay.
again. Okay. So what the ordinance says is if any portion of this deck is off the ground by more than 12 inches, so if one corner is more than 12 inches, it's a deck and needs a permit.
But what if it didn't connect to the other deck? Yeah, if it was separate deck and it was on this side, if some of that was like on this far, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah,
on the right, on the lower side of the picture, that looks like that's probably where it's probably 12 inches or less. Yeah, right down there.
In this
so if they
area.
put in a small little, well, I'll call it a deck, but it wouldn't, a small patio.
That's what we would call it.
And as long
yes.
as it wasn't
as long as
portion of it
any
was more
portion
than 12
of it was
inches,
not
that
more.
they could, you know,
Correct.
they could keep.
Correct. So the whole
wanna get
entire
technical
portion
about
of whatever so if they squared it off right here and every corner was less than 12 inches, we would say that is a patio and does not need a permit, does not need to meet setbacks. It's when one portion of it
As long as
goes
it
over
falls
12
connects.
inches that they would need to call the entire structure in that case a deck and would require a permit.
The whole thing that it comes down to here, the square footage they only have a 9% lot coverage. A lot of the other houses around there are bigger than this house and the deck
I agree.
combined.
I agree. The impervious is very minimal compared to other properties in this area, for sure.
See, my thought is they're not hurting anything with what they have there because there's so little. And what water does run off of that, it's not like it's coming off of some big high deck. It's falling this far down and it's soaking in that I don't see a major problem with it myself, but
Mr. Chair, may I speak? Real briefly, just to some feedback to what Shelley was getting to as far as staff and what they say. I work with the same people she works with, and I have people call me and they'll tell me something, and I will know that's not right. That's not what the ordinance is. I will call anybody in environmental services, and your record keeping system is fabulous. They do better than any county I work with, because I can talk to Jennifer and she can say, oh, Angie talked to such and such on this date and this is what they talked about, and say, we'll have notes on it. And it is a blessing to work in this county because of that system and your staff. So thank you very much. Makes my life much easier.
We work with Sam, and we've worked with him for many years, and that's because he knows you ask the questions. So it's appreciated when we have people who work with us, and he's always done so. And whether it's this county or any other county I've worked in, we have really good people to work with. So it's not a reflection of the applicant's representative, we're just saying there's a process. People get confused. We understand that, but the ordinance and staff we do try to tell them consistently that message.
And I do believe that was a situation here that it was confusion. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with both Tim and Lise, and they are good people. They're not the type of people that try to skirt around anything. Every time I talk to them, they say that they wish you would have known so we didn't have to go through this, because it's more work for you guys and more stress and expenses for them and for me. So I apologize on their behalf for the miscommunications that they heard. I mean, like George said, people hear what they want to hear. I don't think that was really the case. I just think it was a misunderstanding. She didn't understand the technicalities of the ordinance when she was talking to him.
But yet this whole hearing is rolls back to the fact that they were using an unlicensed rental unit. That's where this whole thing started.
Again, and they didn't know that was even a requirement, so they stopped immediately. And then, I mean, Jamie could adhere to that. They quit it immediately, and they will not do it. So
That's kind of, I have to comment on, that's kind of amazing. I'm assuming these are fairly intelligent people, right? Yeah. Why they wouldn't think of that if you're going to have a rental or a business or something, you'd have to have it permitted.
People are smart in certain areas and not in every area. So I understand what you're saying, because I deal with land use every day, and so do you, but they do not. So I think that would be the reason why. That's why.
And I think the suggestion of having somebody sign something is a great idea, but aren't a lot of your questions done by phone? And you know how you'd manage that. I mean, the postage itself and the time for staff to have to send all that stuff out, everything you talk to send it back out to them, I don't know would be manageable.
We try to keep notes, as Sam indicated, so that when another person calls, they can go and reference back to those notes. That's been helpful. So we do try to continue that practice so that everyone, all staff, sees what other people are talking about, regardless of program area.
Mr. Chair, to the applicant, would they be, our choice here is to either let you keep the deck with probably some mitigation, or you cut the deck back and you don't have to do anything.
Well, I'm going to play the safe one on this, so neither of them are sitting next to me. I would say, if I was in their shoes as well, I would take the option of doing some mitigation, as long as it was proportional to the impact that they had, and everybody wins. I mean, the deck
wins.
Looks nice. It will help the lake with a little bit of mitigation, and we can all learn from the situation and move on to the
And it's
next
less
one.
of an economic impact. To the
Less waste, less economic impact.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
No. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing, please?
I so move.
I have a motion, second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign.
We have to do findings.
So did you want to withdraw this?
What?
No. In question number 1, going to our finding of facts, is the proposed use allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located?
This is an R1, and decks are allowed in an R1.
General consensus, yes, for number 1. Okay. Is the variance in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official control?
Well, I'm going to say yes because of the reason that they have a really minimal amount of impervious surface on this property. And the intent of the official controls is to control the water runoff and protect the soil in the lake. And I think with just 9%, they aren't having a huge impact on it. So I would say yes.
I have a yes for number 2. Is that a general consensus? Okay. Yes for number 2. Number 3, is the variance request consistent with the comprehensive plan?
Mr. Chair, I would say yes. The project, it maintains the neighborhoods, the residential character, promoting compatible uses for that area.
And also, I think we probably could use the living goal number 3 as a goal for question number 3.
General consensus of a yes for 3? Okay. Number 4, is the property owner proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by an official control?
And I'll say yes again and reference my comment before that due to the low level of impervious surface, I think it makes putting a deck on being used in a reasonable manner.
General consensus, yes. Okay. Number 5, is the plight of the landowner due to circumstances unique to the property not created by the landowner?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say no. The fact that they could have replaced the existing deck with a 4-foot walkway without repercussions, and they chose not to.
We have a no for number 5. Any other comments to that? Or
I'm going to counter that a little bit. I don't think they did it intentionally. I think they did it out of ignorance. And I know, it's, I guess, I'm a little bit perplexed here. I know we got to go on with the way this is structured, but the fact that you have to answer all these in the affirmative to do a grant seems a little bit unreasonable to me. It doesn't it doesn't allow for unusual circumstances. If we knock one of these out and we say no, boom, it's got to be denied. That doesn't make any sense to me, but press on.
And I'm going to say yes to number 5 because the location of the house, I'm guessing from when they purchased it, yes. The location of the house was where it was. And it's reasonable to be on a lake lot and want to put a deck on the lake side of the house. So I'm going to say yes to number 5.
Dave?
I would say yes, but my reason is that they're willing to do some mitigation to protect the waters more than they were. And for that reason, I'd say for them to spend money instead of spending money to tear this wood off, they can protect the lake by adding the mitigation. We can slide that thing over so they can directly access their beach, and probably the lake will win, and the property owner it'll be a balance.
Ken? Yes, okay. Number 6, will the variance maintain the essential character of the locality?
I'd say there's other homes on this lake that have decks on the exterior of the house, so it really kind of fits in with the area.
Do you have a general consensus for yes on that? Okay. And number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations.
I'll say yes because I think it's more about use of the property than it is about economics.
You have a general consensus for number 7? All 7 questions being answered in the affirmative, I'd like to get a motion for approval of this variance.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve. I guess with the stipulation, they didn't get a permit, right? They should pay for a permit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And are you putting any conditions on
and the
mitigations?
mitigation we talked about? I guess we should have a discussion on this, but I think a 5 foot was.
See, I just went back looking and I thought my 5 foot times the 60 feet is about 300 square feet.
Yeah.
And that's about how much they're adding. Deck size is about 300. So we're going 1 for 1. Now, I don't know what's a fair.
So I did the hydraulic calculations for this for a 1-inch rain event. Comes up to 19 cubic feet, which is not even half of the back of a pickup bed full of water. So it's not very much water. So the 5 foot strip would be more than adequate to it'd be beyond what this impervious is, which we're fine with.
Do we have to determine what they plant there, or is that up to the staff or?
Right. Matt. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I know Greg's recommendation is always to use native plant buffers. If you guys want to require a native plant buffer, that's going to enlist them to spend some money because they're going to have to plant native plants, whether it be seed or, the small plugs that we've kind of talked about earlier. Other times you guys have said just a no-mow buffer, which really doesn't cost them anything. They just have to leave whatever strip you say as no mow, and they just don't mow what's there. Now, I don't know what type of stuff they currently have there. I don't know if it's bluegrass because there's snow on the ground. I don't know if they have bluegrass there. My guess is that generally people have bluegrass up into the water's edge. I don't know that for sure. So again, that will be up to you guys as a staff. If you're going to put the condition, you decide what should be done there.
In this case, we asked Sam, how are these people? Are they willing? Do they need to have grass mowed down to look perfect? Or are they okay with having a 5 foot strip that they don't mow in?
I think if you suggested a 5 foot no-mow strip at a minimum, I think they would probably want to landscape it anyways to make it look nice. I mean, they've spent this most extravagant cabin on the lake by any means, but it does look nice and neat and clean. And
So we'll have to ask the rest of the board what their thoughts are. That's just,
Or how to word that, yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, start over.
So I'll correct my motion. I'll move to approve this with the conditions of you have to pay the permit and they have to put a 5-foot buffer, no mow. And if they want to plant anything else besides that, that can be up to them. Yeah,
With an access.
With an access, yes.
With the access moved
To the right, yeah, where it's already shown.
Basically plant it in front of the riprap area.
Yeah.
right. That would would make the most sense.
Yeah.
So you got, I'll second that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, not to stop us again, but if you would look at our recommended conditions, these people need to have a township road variance. Now, generally, we require them to go to get that before coming to us. However, when talking with the township, that wasn't going to be able to be done until June, and we didn't want these people to have to wait that long. So we heard our request before the township road. So I would recommend that you would also add to that condition that they obtain a township variance, because otherwise, if they don't get a township variance for the road setback for the deck, our variance is really no good. They can't keep the deck on there, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'll modify my motion to include what he said.
Yeah. And the second will be good too.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second, and then the remaining board members. Bonnie?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
All right, motion is approved.
You're lucky Jeff Bertram's not out here to ask you how deep this guy and Jeff Bertram have a lot of history.
Oh, that's right, our training.
It's not like I have to be in Minneapolis after this or anything.
So, Mr. Chair, are we still in session here?
Yes.
Okay. So can we it doesn't have to be tonight, but can we at some point in time at some meeting have a discussion about what I brought up here about it's so restrictive.
But isn't that based on state law of
Mr.
how
Chair-
that's set up?
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
we'll certainly bring that back to the board so that you have the reasoning behind that. So you'll understand how we got to that process. It's the same across the state. It's not just unique to us. All parties are required to answer yes.
Okay, so at least, yeah, I for one would like to have a better understanding of it.
We'll provide that. I know we've got training. Angie's talking about some additional training coming up.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of works like it.
Mr. Chair, do you want to take a break, or you?
Guys.
How long do you think this?
It's a half an hour. 22 minutes, apparently.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for taking some time to listen to me and our presentation. My name is Steve Hammes. I'm the Assistant County Administrator. And I first of all want to thank you all for the service that you're providing to the citizens of the county by volunteering to be members of this board. It's important that the citizens of the county take part and have a vital role to play in making decisions that impact our neighbors, and your dedication and service is appreciated by county administration and the Board of Commissioners. The reason that I'm here today is to continue to provide training to boards and committees across the county to help make things more standardized and create a benchmark for how boards and committees and volunteers act on behalf of the county. Again, you're all volunteers and we appreciate your service, but when you're serving as members of a board or a committee, you're not representing yourselves. You're representing the county as an entity, and the decisions you do and the meetings you attend, you are operating as, under the flag of the county. And so we want to encourage everyone to continue to improve and get better, just the same way we do with our employees. We've been doing leadership training with employees for the past several years and upgraded our training, as some of our former employees will know, on different aspects of professionalism or data practices or risk management. And again, it's only fair and proper that we provide training to the volunteers who work for us as well in the capacities that you do. So last year I brought out the Respect in the Workplace training for all boards and committee members, so that our new members will have to go through that as well. Rob, you will remember the training from your past experience. But again, part of our mission and values is, again, professionalism, accessibility, and the ability to be collaborative. And as part of that, we want to ensure that our boards and committees are adhering to those values as well. To that end, I think I mentioned last year that we were working on a couple of new trainings for this year. One that you'll go through today is best practices. I'm not going to, do the other training as much with everybody. I may just do that as a knowledge point training that you can take on your own. But this one I'm doing some of the committees in person, just to make sure I can get some feedback and see how it's going. This one's on best practices for how to run a meeting. I have to say, from sitting in the back booth there and watching the meeting going on, you do a very good job. This is a very good committee. It runs the meeting very well. So, Mr. Chair, you do an excellent job, and I don't think there's a lot that you'll have to take away. But again, it's something we want all of our boards and committees to learn from. We want all of your skills to improve. So that if there's any tidbits you take away from this, great. Again, it's something to keep in the back of your minds as you continue to serve in the county. And again, we hope that this training and the next one, which is on Robert's Rules of Order, can help your experience. And again, our goal is to keep training you, make you better at your jobs, and maybe continue to have work on other committees, maybe be on the county board. So with that, I'll ask the booth to start the presentation, and 22 minutes and counting.
Hello and welcome to this Stearns County training, Best Practices for Effective Meeting Facilitation. Thank you for joining me today. So, what are public meetings and why are they so important for our work? Public meetings bring diverse groups of stakeholders together for a specific purpose. They are held to engage a wide audience in information sharing and discussion. Public meetings can be used to increase awareness of an issue or proposal, can be a starting point for engaging constituents, or a means to further public involvement. Public meetings are for people to come together to express their opinions, hear a public speaker or proposed plan, engage in shared learning about a topic, or work together to develop solutions. The main advantage of public meetings is the ability for stakeholders to listen to and talk to each other. By creating a safe venue, people can speak comfortably together, share common issues, and a common purpose. When done well, they help build a feeling of community. In this training, we will be providing best practices in facilitating meetings. First, we're going to review meeting basics. Next, we'll discuss dealing with those difficult participants, and we'll talk about tips to follow when a meeting gets out of control. We hope that this doesn't happen to you, but if it does, these tips will help you to get it back in control. Facilitating meetings using the best practices that you learned today will ensure that you're in line with Stearns County's mission of providing exceptional public services to assure a safe, healthy, vibrant county for all. So let's jump in and get started with the meeting basics. The following are tips on running an effective public meeting. Let's start with some public meeting basics tips. First, start on time. It's your responsibility to call everyone to order and get the meeting off the ground. Many of the meeting participants are volunteering their time to attend, so it's important to be respectful of that time. Get your voice heard. Public meetings are usually held in bigger venues, which aren't necessarily better when it comes to equipment or acoustics, so make sure everyone can hear you. Clarify roles and rules. Decide on guidelines in advance and share those up front. For example, let people know that you will be sticking to the agenda, that comments are to be addressed to the chair, that heckling will not be allowed, or that there will be a question and answer section to allow everyone to have their say. Follow the agenda. It's your responsibility to make sure that the agenda gets followed. If anything extra comes up which needs to be discussed, put it down as an action point for the next meeting. Be fair but firm. Make it clear that debate is welcomed, but personal abuse will not be tolerated. Keep it going. Many people will probably want to contribute their views, but there will come a time when there's no point in continuing with a discussion. You may just be going around in circles, or the same thing might be repeated over and over again by different people. When that happens, it's your job to draw the line under each topic of discussion and keep things moving. Summarize. After each agenda point, summarize the key discussions, opinions, and actions. It's your job to make sure that discussions and actions are clearly understood and that they are moving in the right direction to accomplish the meeting's objectives. Thank your audience. Always thank audiences once the meeting is finished. It's common courtesy and people really do appreciate it. They're more likely to come to the next meeting if they feel like they have made a contribution. It's also a good idea to let them know the date of the next meeting in your closing comments. Now, let's talk about dealing with those difficult participants. Meetings can bring out the best and the worst in people. Some people thrive on the opportunity to share their views in front of a large group. Some try to hide away, while others take over and don't let anyone else get a word in. If you're the one running the meeting, you need to be able to deal with all types of people. Here are some of the more testing participants you might come across and how to deal with them. The first type of difficult participant you may see in a meeting is the aggressive type. This person usually has a grudge to bear or is angry about an issue that affects him or her personally. They can try and dominate the meeting by shouting down and intimidating other attendees, as well as the person running the meeting. So what can you do to deal with the aggressive type of person? Establish ground rules at the beginning of the meeting, such as no one is allowed to interrupt and personal insults are forbidden. Find out what's causing the person to be aggressive, and if it's a personal issue, explain that the meeting can't deal with this. Instead, suggest an alternative arena where they can raise it. Offer feedback to them in private if it's a personal concern they have, and prevent them from making too many contributions by encouraging others to give their views. Who is the talkative type at a meeting? These people usually see themselves as experts on an issue and think they know best. Again, they might dominate the meeting by talking at great length or constantly interrupting. How can you deal with the talkative type? Set limits on individuals' speaking time at the beginning of the meeting. Acknowledge their contribution, but if they're going on too long, try and interrupt as tactfully as possible. Avoid making eye contact so they can't keep interrupting you. And you can always direct questions to other attendees instead. Next up in the list of difficult participants is the argumentative type. Whatever the issue, this type of person will play devil's advocate and argue the opposite of everyone else. It can be useful to see the other side of an argument, but if it goes on too long or gets overheated, it can detract from your meeting. What to do with this argumentative type of person? You can start your meeting by emphasizing the need for constructive comments. Try not to get drawn into their argument. Respectfully acknowledge what they've said and move on. Finally, bring in other participants in the meeting to give their views. The last in the list of our difficult participants is the non-participant. These people are rarer at public meetings. However, they may feel intimidated by their surroundings or by the other people there, and may need some encouragement to speak up. What can you do for this non-participant? Be sure to ask anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak to give their views. If they do speak up, encourage any input they give. If you know they're interested in or are an expert in a specific area, ask for their expert opinion. Finally, if all else fails, handing out questionnaires for people to fill in is a great option for people who might be too shy to speak out. And don't forget to collect those questionnaires at the end of the meeting. Now that you have some tips to deal with the difficult personalities at your meeting, it would be nice to think that if you arrange and publicize your meeting properly, everything will go off smoothly. Sadly, things don't always go to plan, and if you're talking about an emotional issue, the discussion may develop into a dispute. So here are some tips on handling a meeting that has gotten off track. So what can you do when a meeting gets out of control? First, keep your cool when tempers flare. Take a few deep breaths or count to 10 in your head. Make the purpose clear. Public meetings can be held for all sorts of reasons. Maybe something's already been decided and you need to meet to delegate tasks to participants. Make sure that you make the purpose of the meeting clear. If something's already been decided, it's not up for discussion. If people come expecting a debate and that doesn't happen, they're more likely to make their voices heard in less organized ways. Explain the rules. Explain the structure of the meeting before it starts. You might, for example, make it clear that speakers are not to be heckled and that there may be a question and answer session afterwards. You could emphasize that all comments are to be addressed to the chair and that attendees must put their hand up and wait to be called on before speaking. The structure should also be explained in the agenda, which every attendee should have, but it never does any harm to reiterate the agenda, as some attendees won't bother to read the handouts. Be polite. If someone heckles you, don't get involved. Trading insults won't do much for your credibility and will just waste the time of the attendees who are there to support or engage in worthwhile debate. Firmly point out to the heckler that you're anxious to hear all points of view, but that these must be given at the correct time and in the correct form. If you're polite, it's likely that the majority will side with you. Once a heckler realizes that he or she is in the minority, they will hopefully either quiet down or leave. Debate, not disruption. If you're nervous, it's easy to mistake a passionately held viewpoint for a disruptive comment, especially if the viewpoint doesn't fit with your own. Don't come down too hard on people, otherwise you might find that others are nervous about speaking up. It's a fine line to tread, but once you're in the meeting, you should get a feel for the amount of discipline needed. Don't be afraid to say you don't know. Hopefully, you'll have done your research before the meeting starts, but there's always a chance that someone's going to hit you with an issue you know nothing about. If this happens, remain calm. Use the old politician's trick of repeating the question or using a phrase such as, "That's a very interesting point." This gives you a few seconds to get your answer straight in your mind, reducing the possibility of stuttering or sounding unsure. If you don't know the answer, admit it. Say something like, "I wasn't aware of that particular issue. Does anyone else here have any knowledge about it?" If nobody else speaks up, ask the questioner to see you after the meeting to give you some background. It could well be something important, and even if it's not, you'll look good in front of your audience. Maintaining civility in meetings sets an example for all participants and creates a culture of professionalism. This can sometimes be a challenge, but it will pay off in a smoother, more pleasant experience for participants and for you. Here are a few ways to keep meetings civil. First and foremost, the golden rule. Everyone should treat others how they would like to be treated. Aim for a tone that is both friendly and professional. Demonstrate civility toward everyone, whether you are addressing other members of the governing body or members of the public. Use titles and last names as a sign of respect. Separate the person from the problem. Avoid personal attacks, name-calling, or questioning people's motives. These actions undermine your effectiveness and your message. This is true for debates and interruptions as well. Avoiding these will help you stay on message. Be attentive and use active listening skills. Active listening is fully concentrating on what is being said, rather than just passively hearing the message of the speaker. Make sure you comprehend the message. Pay attention to the speaker's verbal and nonverbal language to fully understand what they are trying to communicate. Retain the information. Try to remember key points of the speaker's message, take notes if necessary, and then respond by summarizing or paraphrasing key points. Embrace diverse points of view. Different sides of an issue should be explored, and those who will be affected by an outcome should be allowed to share their views. Even if you disagree with someone's proposed solution to an issue, they may have points that should be considered. Limit statements in discussions to those that move the conversation forward. Keep remarks brief, to the point, and non-repetitive of comments others have made. Here are some additional suggestions to make sure that your meeting is effective and goes off without any problems. First, government is known for having many abbreviations and acronyms. Try to avoid using these, or at least explain them the first time you use them so that all participants understand their meanings. If decisions are going to be made at the meeting, make sure there is enough information provided so that members can make informed choices. Anticipate any questions that might arise and have necessary staff from other departments at the meeting to respond to those technical questions that you might not be able to answer. Provide a range of ways for people to share their ideas. Not everyone will be comfortable sharing in a group. Remember our non-participant that we talked about earlier. Consider ways to gather ideas and input that don't involve public speaking. Make timely decisions. Sometimes there will be pressure to put off making a decision until everyone is in agreement, but try to avoid delaying decisions. Don't give in to the pressure of groupthink. Groupthink is the practice of thinking or making a decision as a group that discourages creativity or individual thinking. At the same time, avoid reactionary decision-making based on one or two upset citizens. They may be the most vocal, but that doesn't necessarily mean they represent the majority. Thank you for taking the time to watch this training on best practices in meeting facilitation. By following these suggestions, you will honor and exhibit Stearns County's values, being professional, approachable, responsive, collaborative, fair, and equitable. Thanks again, and have a great meeting.
And again, thank you for taking the time in your meeting. I know you probably would like to get out of here, but to sit through this, and I think it's important, again, as we're launching this, to help everyone become better at our jobs and roles, to have trainings every so often to think about these things. Again, watching your meeting tonight, I think you're a great committee, and I loved how you opened the meeting by, again, walking through the agenda, how participation was supposed to happen. It's like you took this already beforehand, and just did it matter of course. So, thank you very much. I appreciate all your time, and if you have any questions or comments for me, you can either let me know now or any other time. We've gone through many versions working with the Tech College to craft this message, so probably 20.
I'll second. That's here.